Hey everyone, it's Andrew with BTS Properties. Hey, so what I wanted to do today is go through and look at how to analyze a property to see if it would be a good rental. Specifically, we're going to be looking at cash flow. So, um, I just went and found a random listing on Zillow in Peoria here, and I think we'll just kind of walk through how I would look at this if I were looking at trying to purchase this property. So, we're going to use, I have a little spreadsheet here, which I'm going to go through and kind of just blank out for the moment. Um, so this is a pretty simple spreadsheet, and the reason that you can make this more complicated if you want, but really at the end of the day, this isn't too difficult of a problem that we're trying to solve. Really, the question that we're answering is how much rent do we think that we can get? And then what are our expenses going to be? How much are we going to be paying every month? Um, And based on that, we can put together an offer or see if a certain purchase price makes sense based on whatever your criteria for purchase are. So let's go ahead and kind of walk through this together. So in this case, let's just pull 114,900 as the purchase price. And there's a couple things that the purchase price is important for that you'll see have just been filled out. So taxes are going to be based on the purchase price. Um, a common, we'll circle back to that when we get to the expenses, but you'll see a couple things filled out here. The other thing is your debt payment. Obviously, your loan is going to be based on your purchase price, and that monthly loan amount will vary based on that. So we got a purchase price. If you want, you can go ahead and put in a repair cost estimate. In this case, we're just going to assume um, just to make things a little bit simpler here, we're going to assume there's no repairs needed, that it's rent ready. Obviously, do your due diligence on that. Sometimes there will be repairs that are needed. But for just looking at cash flow, we don't need to worry about that too much at the moment. So um, the next thing that we need to go and figure out is what do we think rent's going to be? So definitely talk to the property manager if you're going through this. But before you do that, really, you kind of want to do a little bit of research on your own. Honestly, like feel free to reach out if you ever need help doing this. But if you're kind of going through a lot, like will probably be you'll want to be able to screen these out on your own first without having to talk to the property manager. So a tool that I use or that I recommend you use if you don't have access to paid tools for this stuff is Rentometer. You can't trust it 100%, but it does generally get you kind of in the right ballpark. There's sometimes nuances based on like neighborhoods and whatnot that rents vary from street to street, and this doesn't necessarily capture that all the time, but it should give you a general rough idea. So in our case, we're going to go and punch in the address here, 3206 North Indiana. It is a 3-bed, 1-bath. So we're going to do 3 beds, and I'm going to say 1 bath only because I only want to see results for 1 bathroom. We'll click check rent. And here you can kind of see what it thinks and what the kind of comps that it used are at a high level. So again, it's saying average $1,200. Let's call it $1,239. Then you'll see it'll give you a range. So depending on how conservative you want to be, rent, I mean, it varies big time on your location specifically. Also, the condition of the home and amenities that it has. For example, is there a fenced-in yard? Is there a garage? Is there plenty of storage space? That sort of a thing. So, but for this case, let's just say, hey, we think it'll be, let's call it $1,200, a little bit below average. So we're going to punch in our $1,200 here. And for a single family home, that's pretty much all we want to be looking at. Nothing else is guaranteed. There won't be any utilities that are being billed back because the utilities will go in the resident's name. Um, there's a sewer bill in Peoria, but that uh, you will want to bill back to the resident or work with the property manager that bills that back to the resident since it's based on water usage. Um, in this case, if you have like an apartment with garage or carports, you're going to be charged for that. Or again, for apartments, if you have a laundry. But in our case, single family home, pretty simple. Just need to get a good estimate of what the rent amount is. So let's say $1,200. Then from there, we're going to look at some expenses. So um, the first one that we're going to look at is vacancy. Now, in Peoria, you can roughly estimate between 3 to 6% vacancy, give or take. Um, I always like to go towards the high end, so for my purposes, I'm going to plug in 6% here. And that factors in even if you're the best property manager in the world, even if you're the best residents in the world, there's always going to be some time that the unit is vacant. So we got that vacancy expense here. Next thing that we're going to look at is insurance. Um, Insurance, again, talk to a insurance broker about this, but to be relatively conservative, I always just plug in $100 if it's a single family house. That usually is more than I am paying for rental dwelling policy insurance. So again, it's a good conservative estimate. But if you want to be more specific with it, definitely speak with a insurance agent and make sure that you're getting that correct number in here. Taxes. Now, I mentioned earlier, taxes can kind of be a gotcha. So you'll see, like, if we look here, um, so you'll see the tax assessed value and the annual tax amount. Now, a common gotcha here is that you take that annual tax amount and that you use that to calculate your tax expense. Now, the reason that that doesn't work is in Peoria County and pretty much every other county, um, whenever a property is sold, that will typically now become that sale price will become the new fair market value that is used to calculate taxes. So in this case, it looks like it's not too big of a discrepancy here. It's 103 compared to a sale price of, let's see, what's the sale price? 114. So it wouldn't be that big of a jump. But if somebody's had this house for 20, 50 years and they paid $10,000 for it, and the assessed value right now is $70,000, and you go buy it for 114,000, that tax rate is going to be way different. So it's super important to understand um, that your taxes are going to change after purchase, and it usually takes about a year or two for them to implement that updated tax price based on your county. But so in Peoria County, how I roughly do this to get a conservative estimate of what my taxes are going to be is I take that sale price and I divide it by 30. And then you'll see I divide it by 12 to get the monthly cost. But again, you'll want to check the county's tax rate for where you're purchasing to make sure that that is accurate. But for Peoria County, that is a pretty good conservative estimate. So it'll probably be a little higher than it actually will be. But again, for me putting together an offer, I want to kind of think worst case. I'm not going to be down to the dollar on every line item. So moving on, that's taxes. And actually, really quick, if we go back, look, that brings me to about $3,800 a year, give or take. Let's see what it said it was. Yeah, so see about what almost $1,000 a year difference. Again, my 3,800 is conservative, but still. And the other thing that you'll want to plan for that is easily overlooked is repairs and maintenance budget. You're going to have repairs and maintenance again, no matter how good your resident is, no matter how good your property management is, there's going to be some repair budget that you need to um, factor for. So in Peoria, I always like to say about 10% of rents, give or take, should be a pretty conservative estimate. With some of the lower housing prices, that may even need to be higher. Like, probably don't want to go. I would estimate about $100 a month, give or take, as you know, eventually your furnace is going to go out, eventually your roof is going to need replaced, eventually your water heater is going to need replaced. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be spending $100 a month, but some of that stuff, you know, compounds over time. Then you're going to want to set aside some money for your property management. So um, if you're working with us and we charge a 10% property management fee with a $100 minimum, so in this case, you know, I might go in here and update this field to be 10% of the total revenue to get my property management fee. Then you're going to have a leasing fee. Our typical tenancy length is about 3.5 years at this point. But again, to be conservative, I say, hey, what do I think that's going to be? In our case, we actually recently updated our prices to be 75% of the first month. So let's go ahead and say times 0.75. That'll come to be about $30 a month that you'll want to set aside for that leasing fee. Then utilities. So in Peoria, there's a stormwater fee that the owner will pay. There's also a sewer charge that I mentioned. That sewer charge is based on water usage, so we always bill that back to the residents. However, that stormwater fee is not usage based. It is based on basically the amount of non-permeable space that your property takes up. So for example, if 50%, or if there's X amount of square feet that is non-permeable, meaning it doesn't the water doesn't drain into the ground. Um, Basically, Peoria charges you for that. Not my favorite tax in the world or charge, but it is what it is. That varies by property. For single family, usually we're looking at about $10 a month, give or take $10 to $20 a month for that, and that's billed quarterly. But then you're also going to have a registration fee with the city of Peoria and Peoria Heights and some of the surrounding areas. But Peoria Heights is $100 a month for a unit, and then the city of Peoria is $75 for a year for a unit, and then additional units are $25 per month in Peoria. But I would take a look at that. So in our case, we say, hey, single family, so it's going to be 100 divided by 12. In this case, it's actually going to be, because it's in Peoria, it's going to be 75 divided by 12. And then lawn and snow removal, the resident will be responsible for. So we don't have to worry about that. So those are really all of our expenses. There's nothing else that's big there. So then we'll see what our total expense is. And ultimately our rent minus our expenses gives us our NOI. Now what's not taken into account here yet is our loan payment, our debt payment. So you'll want to figure that out. I have a little tool here that I built out, but basically it's just saying, hey, if I have a 80% loan to value, if I put 20% down on a $115,000 purchase price and it's amortized over 30 years, this is 360 months, at a 6.2% interest rate, it will automatically calculate my debt payment here to be $562.98. You can do the same thing if you go to If you just Google loan calculator, then go to this calculator.net, look at the amortized loan one. We can plug it in. Let's see, what was that? 114,900 over 30 years at a 6 point, what did I say, 6.2%? Yep. 703.73. Whoops. That's because I screwed up the loan amount. So we're actually looking at, so um, your loan amount would only be 80% of this value, right? Because you're putting 20% down. So 1,400 times 0.8. If we make that 91,920. Now you'll see 562.98. 562.98. So you can just use this calculator, take that number, and plug it in as your debt payment, and then that will get you to your cash flow, which is the amount of money at the end of the day that's going to be coming into your pocket based on these projections. So in our case, for this property, I see that with these numbers, it's going to be negative $140. So for me, that's going to be a pass. Now, for some people that you might want to get into, what's my mortgage pay down? For me, if it's not cash flowing anything, then it's an immediate pass and move on from there. But to each their own on that. So there's a few things that could be looked into to see if basically we got to make up $140 if we wanted to try and keep going with this. Again, for me, I would put it aside at this point. I think betting on, looks like we'd have to be hitting at least 1,400 to even break even in rent. For me, I wouldn't bank on that with a $3 cash flow. So, but you can play around with it, see what it would take to make it work. If it were me, then I'd come into this purchase price and start being like, okay, what do I need to offer to get some cash flow? So, let's say we can adjust the price from here. If I'm $100,000, now I'm close. If I'm 90,000, now I'm breaking even. So maybe now I can start having a conversation to see where that would end up. But all in all, that's kind of how that ends up working out. And you can do this for pretty much any property. Again, this is not that difficult to do. It's just understanding what your expenses are. If you're in Peoria, this is kind of what you can expect. And then what your rent can be. And again, we looked at how to use Rentometer to get a general idea of what that is. So once you're here, once you figure out what a purchase price, what you can offer at that point, then I would probably consider making sure that your rents are accurate, check with the property manager to see if they think that's reasonable. And you can also check and make sure your insurance is accurate and that your registration, it's pretty negligent, but make sure that your registration is correct. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help. And if we can help with anything else in the future, don't hesitate to let us know. Thanks again.